What if nearly 3 centuries of history never happened? What if Charlemagne, one of Europe's most famous rulers, was completely invented? And what if the real year right now isn't 2026, but 1729? In 1991, a German historian named Heribert Illig published a theory so audacious that academics didn't just disagree, they were furious. He called it the phantom time hypothesis. His claim was simple but devastating. 297 years of recorded history, from 614 to 911 AD, were entirely fabricated. Forged documents, invented rulers, fictional wars, an entire era of human civilization, conjured from nothing. And he said he could prove it. His evidence started with something you use every single day, a calendar. In 1582, Pope Gregory XIII ordered the most significant calendar reform in Western history. The old Julian calendar, introduced by Julius Caesar in 46 BC, had been slowly drifting. It gained roughly 1 day every 128 years. So Gregory's astronomers calculated the accumulated error and corrected it by skipping 10 days. October 4th, 1582 was immediately followed by October 15th. Simple enough. But Illig spotted something in that correction that nobody was supposed to notice. Here's the math. By 1582, the Julian calendar had been running for approximately 1,628 years. At a drift of 1 day every 128 years, the total accumulated error should have been roughly 13 days. But Pope Gregory only corrected 10. 3 days were simply missing. Illig asked the question no one had dared to ask. What if those 3 missing days meant 3 missing centuries? What if the calendar was actually correct, and the history books were lying? Illig's explanation was breathtaking in its audacity. He proposed that 3 powerful figures conspired together at the turn of the first millennium: Holy Roman Emperor Otto III, Pope Sylvester II, and possibly Byzantine Emperor Constantine VII. Their goal? To rewrite the calendar and place themselves at the helm of the mystically significant year 1000 AD. They didn't just change a number. They manufactured 3 centuries of fake history to fill the gap. And at the center of that invented history stood one legendary name. Otto III was crowned emperor in 996 AD at the age of 16. He was obsessed with the glory of ancient Rome and dreamed of what he called a renovatio imperii Romanorum, a renewal of the Roman Empire. His closest ally, Pope Sylvester II, born Gerbert of Aurillac, was the most brilliant scholar of his generation, a man some contemporaries actually accused of practicing sorcery. Together, Illig argued, they possessed both the motive and the means to forge an entirely new timeline. And their greatest masterpiece was a single invented emperor, Charlemagne, the legendary ruler who united most of Western Europe under one crown. Crowned by the Pope on Christmas Day, 800 AD. The architect of the Carolingian Renaissance, the man whose legacy defined the medieval world for centuries. According to Heribert Illig, he never existed. Not one detail of his reign was real. Not the Saxon Wars. Not his famed court at Aachen. Every document, every chronicle, every monument attributed to him. An elaborate fiction designed to fill the phantom centuries. But did Illig actually have evidence for such an extraordinary claim? Before you dismiss this outright, consider what Illig marshaled. The period between 614 and 911 AD is notoriously barren of archaeological evidence across large stretches of Europe. Physical remains from these centuries are suspiciously scarce. Construction techniques that should show clear evolution from Roman to Romanesque architecture instead seem to skip forward, as if centuries of gradual development simply vanished. The Palatine Chapel in Aachen, supposedly commissioned by Charlemagne around 800 AD, displays architectural sophistication that some analysts argue belongs to a later period entirely. The physical record, Illig insisted, didn't match the written one. And here's a detail most people have never been told. The written record raised its own red flags. The vast majority of documents from the Carolingian period survive not as originals, but as copies, many produced centuries after the events they describe. Monasteries across medieval Europe claim to possess charters and deeds signed by Charlemagne himself, but an uncomfortable number of these were later exposed as deliberate forgeries. The donation of Constantine, one of the most consequential documents in European history, used for centuries to justify papal authority, was definitively proven to be a complete fabrication in the 15th century. If one foundational document could be forged and accepted for hundreds of years, Illig asked, why not dozens? Why not an entire dynasty? There's another dimension to the puzzle that even Illig's critics struggle to explain cleanly. Historians have long called the period from roughly 600 to 900 AD the Dark Ages, not because life was particularly grim, but because the historical record itself goes nearly dark. In Western Europe, the number of surviving documents, chronicles, and archaeological sites drops dramatically compared to the centuries immediately before and after. Some entire regions have virtually no reliable records at all during this span. Conventional historians attribute this silence to societal collapse after Rome's fall. But Illig offered a far more radical explanation. The record is empty because nothing was there to record. The centuries themselves were hollow. But that argument only works if you ignore the rest of the world. And this is where the theory begins to shatter. The phantom time period doesn't just cover Europe. It overlaps with some of the most meticulously documented eras of Islamic civilization. The Tang dynasty in China kept precise astronomical records during this exact span. Eclipses, comets, supernovae, events modern astronomers have independently verified using orbital mechanics. The Islamic Golden Age produced scholarship and scientific advances with dates that cross-reference European timelines perfectly. For Illig's theory to hold, the Islamic world, the Byzantine Empire, China, Japan, and India would all need to have participated in the same vast conspiracy, or been similarly deceived. That stretches credulity well past its breaking point. Then there's dendrochronology, the science of dating events by analyzing tree ring patterns. Continuous tree ring records from European oaks stretch back thousands of years in an unbroken sequence. Each ring represents exactly 1 year. There are no gaps, no missing centuries. Radiocarbon dating of organic materials from the supposed phantom period consistently returns dates aligned with conventional chronology. Ice core samples from Greenland, which trap atmospheric data year by year in frozen layers, show no discontinuity between the 7th and 10th centuries. The physical evidence from nature itself contradicts Illig's timeline with surgical precision. So you'd think this matter was settled once and for all. And it is settled. Mostly. The theory has been debunked by virtually every credible historian and scientist who has examined it. Case closed. Except, there's one nagging detail that even the most thorough debunkers have never fully put to rest. Those 10 days. Pope Gregory's astronomers in 1582 were brilliant men. They knew the Julian calendar's exact drift rate. They had centuries of mathematical records at their disposal. So why, specifically, precisely mathematically, did they correct only 10 days instead of 13? The accepted answer is that Gregory anchored his correction not to Julius Caesar's era but to the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, which accounts for the discrepancy perfectly. A reasonable, tidy explanation. But Illig countered that this convenient anchor point was itself a later rationalization, a patch sewn onto a seam that should never have existed. And that question, uncomfortable as it is, still echoes. The mainstream scholarly consensus is unambiguous. The phantom time hypothesis does not survive serious scrutiny. The convergence of dendrochronology, ice core analysis, astronomical records from multiple independent civilizations, and mountains of corroborating archaeological evidence creates an overwhelming case against it. Heribert Illig was not a trained historian. He was a publisher and systems analyst who approached the question as a determined outsider. His critics argue he cherry-picked anomalies while systematically ignoring the vast body of evidence that contradicted him. And yet, his theory refuses to die. It has been translated into multiple languages, debated in university lecture halls, and dissected online for over 3 decades now, because it touches something deeply primal. The phantom time hypothesis endures not because it's likely true, but because it exposes a genuine vulnerability in how we construct our understanding of the past. History is not a photograph. It is a mosaic, assembled from fragments by people who always had agendas. Medieval monks forged documents routinely. Rulers rewrote chronicles to burnish their legacies. The very concept of a universal calendar was a political act, imposed by imperial and papal authority. Illig may have been wrong about the specific centuries, But the uncomfortable truth beneath his theory is absolutely real. The history we inherit is only as reliable as the people who recorded it. And those people were never neutral. So, is it the year 2026? Almost certainly. Did Charlemagne exist? The evidence overwhelmingly says yes. But the next time you look at a calendar, that simple grid of days and months we all take for granted, remember that someone, at some point, decided what year it was. And everyone else simply agreed. The question was never really whether phantom time is real. The question is, how would you ever know if it were?